Some comparisons that you will hear will be really, really good. You'll hear a comparison that somebody will make and you'll go, yeah, that's a pretty good comparison. Those things compare quite favorably. Or you compare the things in order to sort of contrast what they refer to as a compare and contrast exercise, right? But there will be people who will use comparisons that you'll go, those two really don't compare at all. There's just nothing really very well comparable to those things. And what's worse is when they try and justify things through comparison. I want to talk today about the idea of comparisons on the Daily Summation from Kurt's Religion and Politics. I'm your host, I'm Kurt, and today is Wednesday, the 26th of January of 2022. Thank you for everyone who is here on Rumble, on the podcast, on YouTube, on BitChute, on CloudHub, on minds.com, and potentially if you are here on locals.com as well. Thank you for coming along and welcome. Today, again, on the subject that we're going to discuss on the Daily Summation for Kurt's Religion and Politics will be comparisons, and I'm going to go ahead and go through my notes so that you have some idea why I'm going through this particular exercise. I was just thinking to myself, it's a good thing I like KFC. Why? Because of the mandate that makes me buy and eat it. You haven't heard about that? Me either. So considering that's true, does it seem reasonable to compare a vaccine mandate where someone says the two are alike to KFC's 11 herbs and spices, not knowing what's in them, right? Not knowing what's in the vaccine, not knowing what's in the 11 herbs and spices. Not so much in my way of thinking. How about comparing the requirement to put cloth on your face to something like that? To begin with, many public health officials have, granted on again, off again, spoken against their efficacy. By the way, the data speaks against vaccine mandates and the efficacy of masks. And let's be plain, how long have measles, mumps, rubella, and so many other things like influenza been around? You realize that none of these is less than 50 years old. Know how I know? Because we were dealing with them in my childhood. And I'm over 50. I'm quite sure they're pretty much all older, much older than that. Forget the efficacy of various COVID mitigations over the long term. In fact, you can't even really talk about that since COVID hasn't been a known thing for more than a couple of years. That is, particularly SARS-CoV-2, whatever you want to call it, the novel coronavirus. Even the pain pills used in comparison, I saw, have been around for a large part of my life. Okay, even pain pills that are being used. Even so, last I saw, there was no requirement to use or deal with most of the things in question. You know, even if you think about the vaccines for mumps, measles, rubella, and various things, it is required if you want to have your kid in school or whatever, but there's no general requirement for that. I hope you can understand the sheer lunacy of comparing such things. Comparing, say, for example, KFC and its 11 herbs and spices that you don't know what's in it by comparison, not knowing what's in the vaccine, right? There's literally no way you can do so without stretching, in my mind, 4 miles. Well, there's my notes, and I ran a little short today on notes, and that's fine because I have plenty to say, I promise. Look, when you talk about comparing, I don't know what's in KFC's 11 herbs and spices to, I don't know what's in a vaccine that somebody's going to try and mandate be placed in my body. You're going to forgive me if I tell you that those two are nothing like similar. First of all, I'm going to pretty much bet you that nobody to this day knows of anything other than the frying in oil that's harmful about KFC, if that. Okay, they'll make the statement that that's true. I don't know how fair that is. I eat KFC periodically and I like it. I don't eat it a lot. But then again, I try not to eat anything too much, so that's not really all that surprising a thing, right? But my point is to say quite simply this. If you compare what's in a vaccine, how that vaccine works, how it will affect people, when the vaccine has been around for a scant less than 2 years for sure, and probably less than a year and a half. If you compare that to what's in the original recipe KFC batter process, I hate to tell you this, but you are making a comparison the which cannot be made. And the same applies to a lot of other things that I've heard people do for comparisons. They compare things that are not being mandated to things that are, right? And I'm just here to tell you that when you do that, that comparison is not an apt one. You can't say that it's reasonable for you to compare even the existing vaccines that exist for things like measles and mumps to something like the COVID vaccination. Why? Because there's no way, even to this point, that COVID vaccination has been around half as long as the mumps vaccine. Why? Because the mumps vaccine, as I understand it, took 4 years to develop and test, maybe longer to develop, but 4 years to test, I think, probably, right? And the point of that is this: COVID's vaccine hasn't been around for 2 years, and it hasn't gone through the standard testing process, as far as I get it, at all. Okay, so you can't even forget Kentucky Fried Chicken, forget KFC. Forget that for the moment, and let's just talk about comparison to something like the mumps vaccine. Look, it doesn't take a genius to figure out that the mumps vaccine, if it was trialed, if it was tested for 4 years, and that was who knows how long ago, because I know I was vaccinated for it, I'm pretty sure from childhood, but certainly from a young age, right? As a military member, I'm pretty sure I got the MMR boosters, right, as an adult. But what that means is a couple of things, right? One thing that it means, that comparison means, is that you're comparing two things, one that's been around for a long time to one that hasn't been around very long and hasn't been shown what the effects of, side effects, whatever you want to say, of giving that thing to people will be. And two, and this is really a very important thing, the initial statements that were made about the COVID vaccine was that it was somewhere 98% effective. Well, when you don't have no body of data, when you don't have a body of data, right? Of course, it's going to look like the thing is 100% effective because you have no data. When you start to get data on the thing, suddenly you're going to realize that the numbers are not nearly as good, or likely not nearly as good. You may luck out. It may work out to be as good. But I'll just tell you this right now, as far as I know, that is not the case. It's just not the case. Okay? So, and in fact, from everything I'm hearing, it's not effective really at all. You can say, well, it's because of different variants of COVID. Well, yeah, okay. It's fair to say that the flu vaccine is not particularly efficacious because there are different strains of the flu, and it makes a difference which strain the vaccine was made for as to whether or not it's going to be effective on whatever the current strain is. If it's not the same strain, it's not going to be effective. And it's about a 30, I think it was somewhere between 30 and 38% chance that the flu vaccine was going to be efficacious. The thing is, even if you made a vaccine for every one of the strains of COVID that are out there, which I'm not sure how that would work out, but let's say you did that. The question is, would it even make sense, for example, to give a vaccination for Omicron, which it appears is extremely low, deadly, is not particularly deadly, is not particularly bad in terms of its symptoms, right? Does it even make sense to make a vaccine for that? And if it does, who does it make sense to give that vaccination to? Right? These are the questions that you have to ask. But what I'm getting at here is when you hear people make comparisons, you need to really pay attention to the things they're comparing, because lots of times those comparisons, if you really look at them at all, you're going to go, no, that's not an apt comparison, and you shouldn't be doing that like that. What you're doing is trying to mess with people, whether you think so or not. Either that or you haven't thought the thing through yourself very well, and that is a problem. This has been the Daily Summation from Kurt's Religion and Politics. I'm your host. I'm Kurt, and today is Wednesday, the 26th of January of 2022. That means tomorrow will be, today is the middle of the week, right? Basically for a work week for most people. That means tomorrow will be Thursday, the 27th of January of 2022. Heading ever closer to the weekend. And thank you for everyone who's been here on Rumble, on the podcast, on YouTube, on BitChute, that's BITCHUTE, on CloutHub, CLOUT, CloutHub, CLOUT, CloutHub. I think that's right. I'm losing it myself right now. Anyway, also, if you happen to have seen me on minds.com, also on Locals, you might catch me on Locals, and of course on the podcast, as I've said. The subject for today has been comparisons, and tomorrow we're going to talk about the subject of seeking perfection. I'm kind of trying to think exactly what I was saying about that, but I think mostly it's that I think a lot of people, where they realize that perfection is not going to happen, they don't think that that's something that you should be aiming for, and quite frankly, it sort of is. But we'll talk about that tomorrow some more. Hope you're doing well today. Hope everything is going well for you, and hopefully we will see you again on Thursday's edition of the Daily Summation from Kurt's Religion and Politics. The speaker on this edition of the Daily Summation is Kurt Schubert. This podcast was recorded on Wednesday, the 26th of January of 2022. The Daily Summation is created for Kurt's Religion and Politics. Thanks for watching this edition of the Daily Summation from Kurt's Religion and Politics. I hope you found it entertaining or instructional, or maybe both. If you want to see more from me, you can go to blogs.kpschubert.com. That's blogs.kpschubert.com. I am on Twitter, Parler, and Minds.com. My handle on each of those is @kpschubert. That's @kpschubert. I have a Rumble and a YouTube channel. They are the Kurt's Religion and Politics channels on Rumble and YouTube. I have a Facebook page. The Facebook page is Kurt's Religion and Politics as well. I am on Patreon. If you want to support me, that's one of the better places you can do that. And you will find me at Kurt's Religion and Politics on Patreon. I have a podcast. The podcast is podcasts with an S, .kpschubert.com. That's podcasts.kpschubert.com. I think you should be able to find me with relative ease on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify as well. The best way I find to do that is to look for Kurt's Religion and Politics. You can try to use the Daily Summation. I find that it doesn't work as well as a general rule, but you can always try that. I'm glad to have you aboard today, and hopefully we will see you again tomorrow.